It's worth making the investment in people that are really good at their job. You focus on what you're really good at and your expertise and hire those, the attorneys, the HR professionals, the marketers, whatever holes that you have. Make the investment on the front end because it's going to actually save you time and money down the road versus you trying to figure it out on your own.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups and 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Lori Highby, and as a quick introduction to Lori, so I went to high school, loved art classes, and went to university and started out in art classes before moving over to marketing, and has been in marketing ever since. So worked full time and did school at nights and weekends, I believe. Worked for a web development company while in school. Graduated, worked for a couple different marketing agencies, and then while working at the last agency. Her boss and mentor got into a motorcycle accident, I believe, and she took over some of his accounts, and then she took over his book of business. And then later, the owner asked the owners to become a partner. Decided that would leave, do her own thing in about 2008, and so thought that she could do it better, which I think is or how most entrepreneurs and business starts, and it's then evolved over the last 13 years from there. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Lori.
Well, thank you. You did a good job capturing all the notes, didn't you?
That's right. I try and condense a much longer journey into a 30-second preview. So I did my part. Now is turning it over to you just a bit. So now let's unpack that a little bit more. So tell us a little bit about where your journey got started in high school with art class.
Yeah, I mean, as any high school student is, what is it that really, what kind of classes do you want to take? Where do you want to go? And I just found that I was really passionate about art. And so I exhausted all the programs that my high school offered. And I actually ended up taking some classes, so art college courses while I was in high school. And then that's where I learned a little bit about kind of the path related to going to college and in the art career. So I started going out for commercial art, which is now referred to as graphic design today. So that might give you a little tip as to my age. They don't even call it that anymore. But when I was in class attending a sociology course, I found and was completely fascinated by the concept of how your surroundings really influence your decision making. And that's really where my interest in marketing came. So I changed my major from commercial art to marketing. Very non-traditional student, as you mentioned. So I was going to school nights and weekends while working, a couple different jobs, equating to about 40 or 50 hours a week.
Now, let me ask one question just before you jump too far. So you started out kind of taking art classes in college. What made you switch to kind of go or now graphic design, but, art in that sense? What made you switch to marketing? Was it, hey, job prospects are horrible in art and I never going to be employed? Or was it more, hey, I love marketing and want to do that? Or, hey, had a good class or good experience, or kind of what made you decide to shift?
Yeah, it was so that sociology class that I took. And, there was a chapter about like how messaging influences decisions, and your surroundings. And so when I was, going to school for the commercial art and understanding like colors and images and visuals and how they can influence things, the messaging side of things is really impactful too. So marketing and just how understanding and creating messages that connect and resonate with your audience really is what attracted me. And I realized that, from a creative perspective, it doesn't just have to be, drawing or painting something. It's so much bigger than that. And that's what was like, wow, I didn't realize this was like a whole world that exists from a career perspective. And yeah, a lot more opportunities when you pursue marketing versus commercial art, which is this really small window of creativity.
No, and that definitely makes sense. And so Didn't mean to interrupt your story. So
That's
now, you
okay.
say, okay, gonna switch, it's a different field. Never realized it was even out there, and it sounds fun and exciting. Now you worked as or for a firm as you're going through college, right?
Yeah, so I was actually working at a web development company while I was pursuing my commercial arts degree and learning a ton of really cool things when it comes to just the creative and visual side of things. But when I switched to marketing, it expanded it even further. And it's like, okay, so you can make a website look pretty, but let's talk about making sure like that user experience is really powerful and the messaging is strong. And then how are we going to get people to that website? So it's just like opening up this whole world, as I mentioned. So I went from I'm going to pursue an associate's degree to now I'm going to get a bachelor's degree in marketing to, wow, this whole business thing is fascinating. I'm going to go get my master's in business. So yeah, it was fascinating journey. Went to
No,
school way longer than I anticipated.
no, but it's interesting. So I got an MBA or when I did the law degree and I did an MBA at the same time.
Uh-huh.
But it was interesting more so after I got the MBA and I got into the real world is interesting the psychology behind marketing and converting people and calls to action and funnels and follow-ups and everything
Totally.
else. And it's one where I never really, for a while in my career, I never really thought about it. Oh, you get a client, you do the work, you take care of them, and they'll come back. But there's a lot more involved to that, and it makes it a lot more interesting and fun because it has a lot of opportunity to, have skill and to try things out and to do different things and adapt it to different markets. So I can definitely get the appeal there. So now you're coming out of school, you've been working night or working full time doing school nights and weekends, you get that all finished up, you graduate, and then you went to a marketing agency. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I was working at a web development company while I was working on my associates, and then I switched to a more traditional advertising agency. And so there, I learned a lot about doing outdoor radio, print, putting ads in newspapers, buying billboards. So, I mean, that was really cool to learn all of those things. But I learned at the end of the day that the digital was really kind of where I was excited about, like the technology, the new up and coming. I mean, you could do so much more from testing things. Like if you're putting an ad in a newspaper, once it's printed, it's printed. You can't, go back and you delete it and erase it.
You can't go fix that typo on is like you can
right. Yeah. So there's just a lot more, I guess, cushion for creativity because you can quickly tweak things in the digital space. And just I was fascinated by the evolution of what was happening in this space. I mean, this was 15 plus years ago that I really found that I'd rather be in the digital space as opposed to the traditional marketing space.
No, and I think that definitely makes sense, and certainly was probably the right choice given where marketing and sales and the our online and everything it continues to move in that direction. So now you worked with I think you mentioned you worked with a couple different marketing agencies over a
Mm-hmm.
period of time, and it was the last agency that you worked with that I think your boss and mentor got in a motorcycle accident that
Yeah.
kind of set you on or in a roundabout way set you on the path where you're at now. So maybe give us a little bit of insight there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, there's some people that are very serial entrepreneurs like yourself. Like, this is what you're going in and this is what you're going to do. And I didn't necessarily have that mindset going in. I found my mentor and I was super excited because I was kind of looking for one. And unfortunately, I only got to spend about 10 months with him because, as you mentioned, he got in a motorcycle accident. And that was kind of what I refer to as like my pivot point in my professional career. Is I was either it was my time to like go all in and just kind of support the business as much as I possibly could, or say, I'm not interested and leave them hanging and, go find a job somewhere else. And I decided to go all in, and I learned a ton. Here I was, super early 20s, managing over $1 million worth of business for this agency. And was given, some responsibility to not only maintain it, but to grow it. And I did that, which was super awesome. And they wanted me to kind of pursue some additional new business opportunities. And that's where I said, hey, I'm doing all these great things. Make me a partner. And I don't know if it was, they're looking at me like this young, foolish little girl. We're not going to make you a partner. They were close to getting ready for retirement. So, if anything, it was an opportunity for them to build their exit plan. But they didn't look at it that way. So I decided, you know what, I can do this on my own. And that's what I did. My young, ignorant self, not really knowing what I was getting into, but
I
yeah,
think that anybody that sets off on the entrepreneur, do your own thing, start your own business path has to have a relatively high level of naivety in the sense that if you knew all the things you're getting yourself into, the sleepless nights, figuring things out, the being the janitor, being the boss, being the HR department, marketing, sales, client development, everything all mixed together, you probably would never start. So I think that definitely it's one of those where once you get in, you probably love it, but you would never, nobody would ever start if they knew what they were getting in for on the front end. So
for
now you
sure.
get so now you get going on, doing your own business. Say, okay, they're not going to make me partner. I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to do my own thing. It sounded like you had a few clients that were willing to follow along with you or to come along with
Hmm.
the business. Now, did it go, once you started out, did it go swimmingly? You just, hey, we got clients and we built a big business and it went successful and no issues and no drawbacks? Or is it the opposite of, hey, it was a big slog and it was hard to find clients and you had to pivot and you almost went bankrupt? Or kind of how did it go for you?
I just like to describe being a business owner, entrepreneur as a roller coaster ride. If I can just answer that question for you right away. I've seen some visuals shared on social media like, oh yeah, I'm a business owner and it's a straight line to awesome dollars. But no, the reality is there's highs and lows and you got random loops that you're thrown into. And as much as you plan, and I'm a huge advocate for planning, and I'm sure we'll cover that later, but it's never going to go the way you planned. So, I blasted my entire network, everyone I knew, email address, mailing address, and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Let me know if you're interested. I got my first 3 clients that way. I did have some clients follow me, which was awesome. I respected the business and didn't actively reach out and try to win their business. They reached out to me, so that was fair in that sense. And then yeah, I had a business partner for a short period of time that was extremely short lived, and basically I've been on my own since about 6 months into starting the business, I would say. Um, and yeah, I learned some serious lessons, especially on the legal side of things related to that. So it cost me a lot of money to get rid of my business partner, about $50,000. So I know you have a question around your worst business decision, so I might be jumping
Okay.
ahead to that
Hold
one.
on, Phil. No one gets
Okay.
that question. But
Okay.
no, but I think that one kind of follow-on question, because I think that you hit on it. First of all, I agree with you. I always look at it, and I always used to say it was the same thing. It was a roller coaster. And then I had someone else as another guest on the podcast said, it's more of like the whole theme park. You get to the parking lot and you're excited. You get your tickets, you go in. Then you go on some rides and you get banged around and you have to take a break. And then you go and you get the corn dogs and you eat way too many and it makes you sick and you have to sit down. Then you go get on the bumper cars and you get banged all around. And then you, at the very end, you go back and you say, that was fun, but I need a break. So, I mean, it's kind of that whole thing. I think I always look at it, I'm like, well, that's pretty good. Like it probably
Yeah,
is like
I could
the whole
see
thing
that.
started.
Yep.
But so you get kind of that right and go along and do that. And one of the things that I think a lot of people get into is, hey, should I get a business partner? Should I not get a business partner? Is it a good experience? Is it a bad experience? And I've seen it go both ways. Some people, you get it, and it can be both the people that, hey, I'm not a good person that wants to be a business partner. I like to do my own thing. I like to be able to make decisions. I like to be fast paced, and I don't want someone else that I have to always run it by. On the other hand, some people are saying, hey, I need someone that is a good mentor that offsets my skill sets that I can bounce ideas off of. So kind of what took you a bit into partnership, and then what led you back out to doing your own thing. I guess.
Yeah, I think the business partnership was maybe a confidence or a crutch for me to actually move forward. It's like, I'm not doing this all by myself. I have someone coming in with me. And I guess in transparency, it was a family member. It was a cousin, so not immediate family. I would never ever recommend doing that. But
I would think even with family, it's always a tendency that you want to do family. The person, you typically have a good relationship with them, you can trust them. And so it's one that you often gravitate towards. And it can be good. I've known some, but it's also one where, Now when you go to Thanksgiving or you have family activities or anything else, it is one where if it doesn't work out well or there's tension or, it's not like you can get away from it as easy. A lot of
Yeah.
times when it's a business partner that you don't see after work, then, you go home, you relax, you don't have to or deal with them, and, you can go back in or it's easier to part ways. And so I definitely get the saying, hey, even if was a good relationship, it's still a hard one. And then if it's one where it has some tension, it snowballs a bit. So now you're saying, okay, thought I would hire a bit or a family member, didn't work out, decided to, buy them out. And we can talk a little bit about the worst business decision, go on your own. Now, where is that kind of bring us up to speed a bit today? Where is it been? Where is it going? Kind of where do you see the future? Because I know when we talked a little bit before, you mentioned it kind of pivot and adjust, and it took you a bit of time to kind of figure out where you wanted, where you're going.
Sure. So when I started, we were only doing websites, website design, website development. And, eventually people were asking me, hey, what's this Facebook thing? And should I do something with it? Is this good for my business? And I would tell them what to do. And then how do I get found on Google? And, I know all the answers to these questions. So I would just tell them what to do. And then I'd get the question back, well, can you do this for me? So of course I can, if you're going to pay me some money to do it. So really, instead of just saying we do websites, we totally shifted our model to being full strategic digital marketing. So instead of just, we're going to manage your Facebook for you, let's really do some homework, do some research and understand your ideal customer and figure out, is Facebook actually the right channel? And then what's that message? And, some of those things I talked about earlier that really got me sucked into wanting to do marketing is understanding the message and the positioning and where you actually have to place that information to get in front of that ideal customer and help them solve the problem that they have at the end of the day. So we went from, we only do websites, which is project-based work. So you always have to keep looking for your next project, to now we support the big picture digital marketing strategy and the full implementation. And the beauty of that from a business model is that's more of a recurring revenue model. So, it's ongoing engagements that we're constantly managing, creating content. And that's way less stress from a business perspective to have that recurring model, because you're not chasing for that next new project, and you're being more thoughtful and intentional about the type of work that you take on.
No, and I think that there's a lot to unpack in there, but I think one is, a lot of times it's hard, depending on the business and the industry, if you're continually having to chase it, because once you build a website, generally it's typically done. I mean, you may do a little bit of SEO, a little bit of updating, but to a large extent, you finish the project and you go on to the next one. So you're always having to bring in new clients, and you're always having to find them. Whereas if you can find something that's a bit more ongoing service, and it still has to add value. It's not just ongoing service.
For sure. Absolutely.
Ongoing service. But now you can say, okay, I'm transitioning to where it makes it a bit easier to sustain the model, because you're having repeat client, or once you build that clientele, it kind of builds on itself to where you're having clients that are giving it that basis to continue to grow the business. So definitely makes sense. Plus, it's one where I think it's an area that people are still trying to figure it out. It's still evolving, and it's still different for each industry, but there's certainly one that's had a major impact on marketing. So it sounds like it's a great journey. So, well, with that, now we've teased it out a few times, and we haven't actually got to it yet. So we're going to jump to the two questions I always ask at the end of the podcast. Now, before we jump to those, as a reminder to everybody, we are doing the bonus question. We'll talk a little bit about intellectual property. So if you want to hear that question, make sure to stay tuned after the podcast wraps up to hear that question. But without any further ado, first question I always ask at the end of each podcast is, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Oh, well, I did tease that. So it cost me $50,000. But when I was departing from my business partner, I was trusting the internet for, writing the business contract and the agreement of terms, and did not invest the time in speaking with the experts. Instead, I was trying to do it on my own. And I realized,
Googling and finding the first legal form online might not always work out. Is that the takeaway?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty much what I'm trying to get at. It probably would have cost me a significantly lower amount of money to work with an attorney up front to get some, contracts drafted properly, versus trusting what random piece of advice I found online.
No, I definitely get that. There's a lot to unpack there. One is that, bringing on a partner, you always want to be careful because
Mm-hmm.
whenever you have to separate, it's a lot like, a divorce, or you're getting,
Yep.
because you're a lot of times you're with that business partner half the time more than you are a spouse, because you're there every day in, day out. People are putting in time and effort, and everybody values their contribution differently. And when you guys separate, usually it's not, unless you're buying them out or they're retiring, going for another position. But if it's not an amicable separation, much like a divorce, they can get messy and it can cost you a lot more. And so I think that that's definitely one takeaway. The other one is they hit on was Googling a search. Google has made it so everybody thinks they're an expert on everything. It takes 5 minutes, I'll find a form and it's going to be perfect. And I don't need to go pay the attorney. And sometimes that's true. I think that there are situations where it works out, but more often than not, you end up finding out, well, those forms that I thought that I knew what they were and that I could probably figure out didn't work out quite as well. And so I think that, finding the expert as your business grows to make sure it's done how you need it can save you time and money in the long run. So I think those are lessons that definitely a lot of people learn, but also great takeaways.
Totally.
Second question I always ask is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I think it kind of aligns with my biggest challenge. It's worth making the investment in people that are really good at their job. You focus on what you're really good at and your expertise, and hire the attorneys, the HR professionals, the marketers, whatever holes that you have. Make the investment on the front end, because it's going to actually save you time and money down the road versus you trying to figure it out on your own.
No, and I think that, that's a great take. And it's the one that's sometimes a hard lesson to learn for a lot of entrepreneurs, because the reason why you got into business is you thought you could do it better. You thought you were smarter than the other people and you could do it. And a lot of times it's true and you do it better. But even if that's the case, you're very seldom, 99.9% of the time, not going to be an expert in everything. And even if you wanted to become an expert in everything, then you're going to it's not the best thing for the business, because you're not going to be, if you're trying to do everything and be the expert at everything, you're not focusing on where you can add the most value. So I think realizing that there are areas where other people can provide that expertise and that value or definitely be beneficial to your business. Well, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an investor, they want to be an employee, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Oh, great question. So I'm super active on LinkedIn. Just search for Lori Highby. I post almost every single day there. Otherwise, you can visit keystoneclick.com and you'll get a contact form, phone number, all the great details on how to connect with us. But I'm always open to chatting, connecting, and answering anyone's digital marketing questions.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out for any or all the reasons that were stated, because definitely a great resource for your business. So thank you again for coming on the podcast. Reminder, we're still doing the bonus question, but thank you for coming on the podcast as we wrap up. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Also, as listeners, make sure to click, subscribe, share, because we want everybody to find out about our awesome episodes. Last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else in business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. So now, as we wrap up on the normal part of your journey, and what a journey it was great, and thank you for sharing. Now it's always fun to shift gears just a bit and talk a little bit about the subject that I live day in and day out, which is intellectual property. So with that much as a shift, I'll turn it over to you to ask your number one intellectual property question.
I have a really interesting question around podcasts. So I've had my podcast for 4 years now. It's called Social Capital. And I've got about 300 something episodes. I never trademarked the name, and I just came across someone else that's using that same name for that podcast. So I guess what's your opinions? Should I do something about that? Should I have trademarked it?
All right. So here's my very short answer that I'll go trademark it right now.
Okay.
Now that sounds like the self-interested answer of an attorney asking a pet trademark.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But the way that trademarks work, to unpack that a bit, is, and it's the same whether it's podcasts or any other industry, is typically the first person to file the trademark is a presumptive owner and has the most rights to it. So If somebody else comes along after you that trademarks it first, they are in a much better situation to own it, to manage it, and to otherwise limit your ability to grow. Now, you do have some rights as the first user. Now, they're limited, and I wouldn't recommend relying on them. So give you an example of how those rights work. So let's say you open, and I'll make it easy, the world's best pizza shop, and you started in Chicago. And everybody loves your pizza. You just had one location in Chicago, and we're going to call it ABC Pizza because that's an easy one to remember.
Sure.
And ABC Pizza was great. And so you came along, you were doing it for 10 years. People loved you. And you eventually said, okay, I should probably franchise, or I'm going to expand into other locations or do something of that nature. And you said, well, when I'm going to do that, I'm going to go trademark it. I should probably see if I own the rights. Well, let's say during those 10 years that you were just in Chicago, somebody else had gone and trademarked it. What it does is it gives you the situation where you can continue, because you were the first user, the geographic area where you were starting to use it. In this case, Chicago, you can continue to use a trademark. However, the person that just went and got the trademark gets to use it everywhere else except for Chicago. So in other words, you can't go out of Chicago, they can't come into Chicago. And so it gives you a presumption of, yes, as a first user, I can continue to use it. But if you want to expand, if you want to do more things, if you want to go into other markets or hit different demographics or geographic locations, it makes it much more difficult to be able to expand in those areas if somebody else already owns the trademark. So that was the longer answer as to why I would go get it now, just because the first person that files on it is in a much stronger position as far as ownership and be able to manage and direct the trademark than somebody that's maybe started using it first, but now has to say, I have to define where I started, where I'm currently using it, and I can't expand out of that area.
Sure. Interesting. Okay, cool.
So
thank you.
That,
I should trademark it.
Trademark it now. That's my takeaway.
Yeah.
But no, but if
cool.
you or any of the listeners have any other questions, we can help you out. As I mentioned before, you can go to strategymeeting.com. Love to dive in, love to chat, love to make sure everybody's taken care of. In the meantime, appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.